the previous topic we addressed common fractions. Now we are moving on to decimal fractions, and in particular we are going to focus today on reading and writing decimal fractions. So first let's define a decimal fraction. It is a fraction that can be expressed as a number that lies between 0 and 1. So for example 0,5, it lies between, on the left we have 0, on the right we have 1. It is in between those. Similarly 0,634 is a number that lies between 0 and 1. So we are going to use exercise 14.1 to illustrate concepts relating to reading and writing decimal fractions. Number 1 requires that we need to complete the decimal fractions. You can use your calculator to check your answer. So I'm for now going to focus more on the maths portion than the calculator portion. So we have 23 over 100. Now the strategy with moving to decimal fractions is to get at the bottom, or what we refer to as the denominator, a lot of zeros. So if we had, for example, at the bottom a 5, we would rather convert it to something that has a 0, like 10. So we could multiply the bottom by 2, then we have a 10 there, and we will multiply whatever is at the top also by 2. So that's the general strategy. When you think decimals, think zeros for the denominator. So now the other aspect is, what's useful is to imagine 23 is in fact the same as 23,0. In other words, there's an invisible comma 0. Now if we divide, we need to move that comma to the left. If we multiply, we move the comma to the right. How many spaces do we move that comma to the left? Well, the same number as the number of zeros that we have. So since we have 2 zeros, we will need to jump the comma twice to the left. So one jump is to in front of the 3, the second jump is to in front of the 2. So in fact, we have the comma just in front of the 2, followed by the 3, and we know it must be something between 0 and 1, a decimal. So this is already in that format. We can simply add our 0 in front. So this is the same as 0,23. So now for number B, we don't have the 0 at the bottom. So there are now more than one way that we could approach this. We see we have an improper fraction. We could first change it in fact to a mixed number. 5 goes how many times into 13? Yeah, 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. What is our remainder? In other words, what's the difference between 10 and 13? Yes, 3. We know the denominator, or the bottom one, we always keep the same when we move from improper fractions to mixed fractions or mixed numbers. So now we see we already have the whole part as 2, that's why we have a 2 there. We still have to convert the fraction portion to a decimal. So now let's look at that 3 over 5 separately. We want zeros at the bottom, that's our strategy. So how can we get 5 into a number that has zeros following it? Well, let's think. 10 is a number with a 0 following it, a 1 with a trailing 0. So, is there a way that we can get from 5 to 10? Yes, we can simply multiply by 2 at the bottom. So now what we do at the bottom, we have to do on the top. So 3 times 2 is equal to 6. So it's the same as 6 tenths. Now we also know there's an invisible comma 0. Since we only have one 0 at the bottom, and since we are dividing, we have to move this comma to the left. One jump. So it must go to in front of the 6. So it's the same as 0 comma 6. We simply move the comma to in front of the 6 and put in front of the comma the 0. So in fact, we have 2 and 0 comma 6, which is, if we combine them, 2 comma 6. The other way that we could have done it is, instead of putting in this whole step of changing mixed fraction or improper fraction to a mixed fraction, is just from the start to say, well, let's multiply the bottom by 2 so that we have 10. Let's do the same with the top. What we do to the bottom, we need to do to the top. So 13 times 2 is 26. 5 times 2 is 10. We know we have an invisible 0. Dividing means jump the comma to the left. 1 0 means jump one place to the left, just in front of the 6. So it's between the 2 and the 6 that the comma appears. And this is perhaps actually the easier, quicker, straightforward way of doing it. Just wanted to show you there are more than one way. So number 1E, I'm going to give you a bit of time to try this on your own. We already have a bunch of zeros at the bottom, so that simplifies what you need to do. You have less to do, in fact. The key is we are dividing. Key is to insert an invisible comma 0. 13 and 13 comma 0 is the same thing. Then we need to ask ourselves, how many zeros at the bottom? Well, 3. So this comma, we have to jump 3 jumps to the left. So the first jump between the 1 and the 3, the second jump in front of the 1, but now we have a problem. Where to jump for the third jump? Well, in such a case, you have to add in a 0 for the jump that you're uncertain where to jump to. So we actually have, after the comma, 0, 1, 3. We can add the 0 in front. So it's in fact the same as 0, 0, 1, 3. So attempt number F on your own. So first things first, put a invisible comma 0 at the top. We need to, in fact, even before we do that, we want a 1 with zeros at the bottom. So we currently have 25. So let's see. Can 25 go into 10 without remainder? No, so 10 won't work. What about 100? Yes, 25 can go into 100 without remainder. How many times? 4 times. So we know we want something over 100. How do we get there? Well, we have to multiply the 25 by 4. What we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So the 26 we have to multiply by 4. So what's 26 times 4? So 6 times 4 is 24. 2 times 4 is 8 plus 2, it's 10. So we have, in fact, 104. Oh, we could actually just write it straight here. We have 104 over 100 with our invisible comma. Now, since we have 2 zeros at the bottom, we know we need to jump 2 jumps to the left. So the first jump is in front of the 4, the second jump is in front of the 0. So we have in front of the 0 the comma, then we have the 4, and we still have the other 1. Okay, because remember we only jump 2 spaces, so the commas between the 1 and the 0. So 1,04 is in fact the correct answer. So for number 2, we need to express these decimal fractions as the sum of fractions. What does sum means again? It means we need to add. So we need to add the fractions. So now we go back to that familiar primary school maths that you do. Remember you had like tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, etc. So now in terms of tens, how many tens do we have? Well, we have 2 tens. So sum means add. Now we focus on the 3. That's in what position? The tens, the hundreds. So it's a placeholder. That's the fancy terminology for the hundreds. So we have 3 hundreds. So this is what we mean to express decimal fractions as the sum of fractions. Let's do the same for B. Well, we have a whole part plus, what do we have next? Tens. How many tens? 3 tens. Plus, we are busy with sum. How many hundreds? 0 hundreds. Plus, what's next? Thousands. How many thousands? 4. And finally, we add 5. What's after thousands? Additional zeros, so it's 10,000. Okay, so you try to write this as the sum of fractions. So first we have tens. How many tens do we have? 0. Sum of fractions means add. How many hundreds? 0. Sum of fractions mean add. How many thousands? 1. So that's it. I'm sure you will be able to do F. Try it on your own. So, how many tens? 110. Sum of fractions means add. How many hundreds? 1. Sum of fractions mean add. How many thousands? 0. So this is written as the sum of fractions. In fact, you didn't even have to write this last step. All the other ones will be 0, whether it's a millionth, 10 millionth, whatever. When we only have zeros, because remember there's actually invisible zeros after this, we tend not to write them. So let's finish off with a word problem. Number 3. De Wet's farm has 125 hectares of vineyard and 250 hectares of olive trees. The farm is a total of 1,000 hectares in size. First determine the fraction of the farm that are vineyards and olive trees, and then express these as decimal numbers. So, let's first look at vineyards. 125 hectares, so vineyards equals 125 of a possible 1,000 hectares. So that's normal fraction. So let's determine now the second portion, which says express these as decimal numbers. So we are fortunate we already have all the zeros at the bottom. We can insert the invisible 0. We are now allowed to jump the comma. So 3 spaces to the left since we are dividing and since there are 3 zeros. So 1 jump in front of the 5. Second jump in front of the 2. Third jump, the commas in front of the 1. If there's nothing in front of the or to the left of the comma, we simply add a 0. So that's for the vineyards. We still have to focus on the olive trees. So we have 250 hectares of a possible 1,000. So that is now already first step. It's already in a fraction form, though not the simplest, but it is a fraction. Let's do the second part, which asks us to express as a decimal fraction. Okay, now since we have a 0 at the top and a 0 at the bottom, we can simplify things by cancelling. Remember, if we are multiplying or dividing, we are allowed to cancel. So now we have in fact 25 over 100. So we could rewrite this as 25 over 100. We may insert the invisible comma 0. Since we have 2 zeros, we have to jump the comma to the left twice. So it's 1, 2 jumps. So the comma is in front of the 2. As there's nothing to the left of the comma, we insert a 0. So it's the same as 0, 25. as a decimal fraction for the olive trees, as a proportion of the total farm size. So your task is to do exercise 14.1, number 1C and 1D, as well as 2C and 2D.